Alright, so I've opened up the free base file. Make sure to go grab that and follow along with this tutorial. And today we'll be creating the mirror effect from the new Matrix 4 trailer. I've got this scene already prepped. So let's open it up. Let's go into rendered view real quick. And as you can see, we got some lights in here, some objects in here. No materials just yet though. And everything is already set up to get started. Now let's import our character model. I've got it opened up here and I will put the link in the description so you can get it as well. Make sure to download the original file there and let's import it into Mixamo. Make sure you have an Adobe account for this to work. Now you can upload your character here. Make sure you click on upload a character file and here we can upload our model and choose a animation. So I will search up Swagger Walk, which I used for this video. It's a bold, confident type of walk, which I think fit this scene. So I've used this one. Now I'm gonna dial down the overdrive a bit and now we can hit download. Choose the collada.dae file and make sure we download that with the skin enabled. Alright, so let's go ahead and import it into Blender here. So let's go to File, Import, choose the collada type. And let's look up our model. I've got it saved somewhere over here. And there it is. It's called swaggerwalk.dae, which is named after the animation. And let's just hit OK there. Now you will import this model and it will be very small and almost invisible. And that's because of the materials that it got auto applied. So let's go ahead and select one of the body parts here. So this one, and let's go over to the material tab. We got two body parts, by the way. So let's go over to the materials tab and just delete it real quick. Now let's do the same to the other part and that's done. Now with the complete armature selected, make sure you go right click in the outliner and choose select hierarchy so you get all the parts. Let's go and hit RZ90 to make it face towards the camera. And now let's just pull this guy back. So G and X to move this guy back. Make sure it's all the way through the window. So let's see if I got that right. No, I did not. So let's just pull it back slightly. Yeah, so it's behind the opening, which is actually not a window, but a door. So now let's scale this up with S and let's make it somewhat of a reasonable size. If this door was about, I don't know, 2.5 meters tall. So this guy is about 180, 190 maybe. So that's fine. All right, so the animation is looking good. And now let's just go over to the length of our video here, or our animation in this case. And I want to enable time remapping because I think the animation is too fast and I want to get some slow-mo effect going. So I'm gonna set the new time to 150, which makes it, 50% slower than it was before. And now I want to make sure I set it to 30 FPS and I want the end frame to be 112, which is the actual end of our animation. So now there's no frames when there's no motion going on. All right, so let's just add some quick materials. Let's select one body part, which is the main part. I'm going to make this a regular white principled BSDF. I'm just going to decrease the roughness to a 0.25 so it's more shiny. And for the other body part, let's add in a simple material again, and this time I'll make it slightly dark gray, and that's all we'll do for this one. So super easy. Now let's reselect the main body part here. Let's head over to the physics properties and let's add in our dynamic paint. In this case, we want to set it to brush and click on add brush. Now for the paint types in source, we want to use mesh volume plus proximity, which will give us a smoother look. Now let's do the same for the other body part. So not a canvas, sorry, add a brush there. Click on add brush, set it to mesh volume plus proximity and done. All right, so now let's add in our plane here. This will be the base of our mirror. So hit RY90 to make it faces towards us. And let's just pull this back. Make sure it lines up with the wall like so. Yep. And now I want to scale this up. So I'm going to hit SZ and type in 2 to make it twice the size on the Z axis. I'm just going to pull this up. So G and Z. Now, done. Let's just duplicate this real quick. And let's rename our two planes. One is mirror and one is the mirror frame. Now for the mirror frame, let's go over to the object here and let's convert it to a curve. This will allow us to create a super easy mirror frame. So let's go over to the curve properties, so the object properties over here. Let's add in a bevel. Now if we add this in, you will see the top part of the bevel is way thicker than the sides. And that's because the scale of the object is not applied just yet. So let's hit Ctrl A and apply the scale. This should fix this. And I'm just gonna make it slightly thinner. All right, now I'm gonna increase the resolution because I want some more geometry in here. And let's hit right click and use shade smooth on it. And now finally, because this is still a very bland frame, I'm gonna add in some edges in here to make it look nicer. And we can simply do that by switching from a round to a profile bevel. And now if we click in this window over here and we just drag these points in a certain shape, doesn't really matter how, you will get some very interesting shapes going, making it look like an actual picture or mirror frame, more of an antique one, which I think is pretty nice. Now, I can see the character sticking through the mirror, so I'm just gonna pull him back even more until I won't be able to see any parts of the body anymore. Now, for the actual mirror here, let's go ahead and tap into edit mode. And let's hit Ctrl R to add in some loop cuts. I'm gonna add in 3, and what I wanna do is I wanna create squares. So another one on the vertical axis, and this will effectively create even squares. And now I can just simply go ahead and select everything and right click and choose subdivide. Now I will do this until I get about 8,000 or so faces. And they are all nicely squared faces, so that's good for the topology. Now I'm gonna add in a subdivision surface. I'm gonna leave it at 1 in the viewport and I'm gonna set it to 3 for the render. This will give us some nice geometry to work with. Now, in here, let's add a dynamic paint in the physics properties. And in this case, we want to add in a canvas. So let's click the add canvas button. And let's go ahead and change some properties. Now we want to set it from paint to waves. The speed can go down to 0.75 to make it slower. And I like the look of that. The damping can go to 0.2. Which will increase the amount of damping on the waves, making them die out faster. And finally, the spring can go to 0.5, which will make it stick slightly more towards the subject. So this will give us this effect, and I think that's really the base of the entire thing. So this is already looking very good. I think it's still a bit blocky though, and that's why in the modifiers tab, I'll move the dynamic paint above the subdivision surface, so the subdivision smooths everything out. Now let's right click it and hit shade smooth, and it's looking very nice. Now next up we want to bake the cache there, so let's go over to the cache menu and let's hit bake all dynamics, so our animation is completely baked in and it's locked in and won't change anymore. So that's usually better for the viewport playback as well. Now if we head over to layout again, we can start working on the materials. Now to do that, I have enabled the Blenderkit Addon, the material library, and it will show this toolbar up here, and it will allow us to search for materials. So if we look up here, some materials, let's add them to our scene. So first of all, I want to add in the paint. So I've used the Sci-Fi Painted Wall 01, and you can just click it, drag it over to the object you want it on, and it'll apply automatically. Now I'm just gonna head on over to the shading tab here, so it's slightly easier to work with the materials here. So yeah, we got the Sci-Fi Painted Wall on there, and I'm just gonna increase the scale here because I want to see more repetition in there. So I'm gonna go for something like a 4, giving us more repetition and smaller details, making it look more realistic in my opinion. So next up we want to add in the brass, which is the scratched brass, this one, brass scratched. And we want to add in to the frame here. Oh, it applied it to the actual mirror, but that's an easy fix, just delete it from the mirror and it's now in the drop down menu here. So select the frame and just apply it over there. Nothing to do there, so done. Next up, we want to add the wood painted white to the plinths, which are the small cubes stretched over on the sides. So just make sure you apply it on all the plinths. They are named in the base file, so you should be able to find them easily. And next up, we want to add the wall ornament texture by Julio Sillet. He makes some great textures, by the way. And apply it to both of these wall ornaments on the sides. Now, I used a scale of 2 or 3, I think. Let's just go into viewport shading and solo this object. Yeah, okay, so I used 2. So make sure you use a scale of 2. And that's those materials done. And finally, for the floor, I looked up a parquet material. And I was just applying it over here on the floor. It will really darken our scene. I'm just gonna, decrease the scale because it's too big. So I'm gonna go for a scale of 0.25, which will look good compared to the size of the character. So now that just rests us with the final material, which is the actual mirror, and that's the only one we'll create ourselves. So let's go over to viewport shading and let's add a new material. I'm just gonna call this one mirror. And it's actually very simple. Just crank up the metallic value all the way to 1 and roughness down to 0 and you get a mirror. However, I'm just gonna add a slight roughness on some parts to get some more detail in there. But if you want to, you could just leave it at this. Now I'm gonna add in a color ramp and a noise texture, plug these into each other and plug the color ramp into the roughness. Now let's hit Ctrl T on the noise texture there. Make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled in preferences to get that. Now let's just crank up the detail, crank up the roughness on the noise texture and crank up the black value on the color ramp. Alright, so this is good, but I want some exclusion in the center part. And to do that, I'm gonna add in a mix RGB node and combine it with a gradient texture to effectively mask the noise on the center of the mirror. So add in the gradient texture and add in the color ramp. And let's just preview the gradient texture by Ctrl-Shift clicking on the color ramp. And I'm gonna change the gradient texture to a spherical texture. And let's hit Ctrl-T on this one and change it from UV to object. So we'll center it on the mirror. And now we can just adjust the scale here with the mapping node. And I want this to fill out the shape of the mirror. Now I'm gonna change the gradient, or the color ramp actually, to a B-spline to make the effect more gradual, and then just increase the scale again so we get a nice fade on the side. Alright, so let's just enable our material again by Ctrl-Shift clicking on our material, and I'm gonna set the mix RGB to multiply with the factor to 1. And it's looking good, but it's inversed. So let's just inverse the black and white colors on the top color ramp there. And now we are getting what we want. So effectively we have some roughness on the sides, making it look like the mirror is worn and the center is still bright and clear. Cool. All right, so I think the noise is just slightly too big. So I'm just gonna increase the scale to 10, making it smaller. All right, so that's that. Now, that's the mirror done and it's working properly. You can see the reflection in here. However, our scene is way too dark. So let's go over to the world settings, click on the yellow dot over here and choose a environment texture. Now, I'll open up my environment texture. I'll put the link in the description where you can download it for yourself. And I'll use this one. They are all from HDRI Haven and completely free, by the way. So yeah, I'll use this one. And that's some lighting in here. Now let's head on over to shading again. Let's go into rendered view again and change our shading from object to world. Now with the environment texture selected, let's hit Ctrl-T. And let's just rotate it on the Z-axis till we no longer see the openings in the windows anymore. But we still get some bounce light, which is what we want to lighten up our scene. Now I'm gonna increase the strength of the HDRI to 4 because I want more bounce light. I think this is too much, so I'm gonna go for 3 actually. Now we want to import the light or lamp model I used for the scene, which you can download over here. Again, I'll put the link in the description, so go ahead and look over there to download it yourself. It's a very neat model, so I really like it and it really fits the scene. So let's go over to File again, to Import to Collada. Yep, that's the one. And let's look it up. I've got it saved over here, and I'm going to import the model. Now it's added to the scene, but it's very small again. So let's just hit S and scale it up until it's sort of a nice size. Something like this. Now let's rotate it on the Z-axis, so RZ -90 in this case. And I'm just gonna move it towards the wall and line it up with the lights I have already set up in the scene. So maybe scale down a bit, move it up, line it up, like so. Pull it back slightly, make sure it's actually touching the wall. And now let's just duplicate this with Alt-D. So we get a linked duplicate, so if you make changes to one, it also changes on the other one. And let's just line it up with the other light. All right, so that's good. And if I zoom in here now, okay, so this is already looking pretty good. There are no material just yet, but hey, the placement is good and the light is fitting this scene. So let's go over to shading again and change it from worlds to object again. And now with the principled BSDF selected, let's hit Ctrl-Shift-T. This is a no wrangler add-on thing again, so make sure you have that enabled. And let's look up our model here. It came with the textures downloaded from Sketchfab. And let's just select all of these and then hit Principled Texture Setup, which will automatically apply to the right sockets, and your model should be looking nice as is. Okay, so the lights are textured, the lamps actually, but they are looking fine. However, the cloth on the lamp is not glowing, so I'm just gonna go and edit this real quick. So let's just tap into edit mode on our lamp model, and let's go ahead and use C, which is the circle select tool, to select all of the white faces here. Now I'm gonna add a new material. So add in the new material here, like so. And I'm gonna call this one emission, and I'm gonna hit assign, so it applies only to these faces. Now I'm gonna change the emission from black to white, increase the strength to like 10, and maybe change the color from white to a very pale yellow orange color. So now they are looking like they are actually turned on, and they are really fitting the scene, and also generating slightly more light bouncing towards the walls. So I think that's looking cool. All right, so now we want to animate our camera. So let's go to the first keyframe of our animation. Let's hit G with the camera selected and X, and I'm just gonna pull this in and then hit I and choose a location keyframe. Now let's go to the last keyframe, and I'm gonna do the reverse, so G and X, and just pull this back until we like what we are seeing, and I'm gonna hit I again and choose location again. Now with both of these keyframes selected in the timeline over here, let's hit T and choose linear, so we get a nice constant motion for our camera, which I think fits the scene better. Now as the character moves, he suddenly enters the light from the window there, so I need to rotate it some more. So let's go back into the world settings in shading here. Let's increase the rotation on the Z-axis until we no longer get any light on our character at all. So yeah, I like this. Cool. All right, so now if I go into solid view again, and I like to enable the random here, so I get a random color per object, which makes my scene more readable to me. Let's just play this back, and now we get the entire scene visible. Now all the render settings are already enabled, so you can just go ahead and render the animation. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial about the Matrix 4 mirror effect I did in Blender. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. And if you did, then please leave a like, subscribe, or click on the bell icon for further notifications on future videos that I make. I would also like to point out that the project files for this video are available on my Gumroad for just $2. They do not include all the free models that I download from Sketchfab, but I will put link in the descriptions to where you can find those. So I hope I see you in the next one.